Welcome to Evilive, the live media streaming show. Let me start that again. Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how horny do you actually have to be before thorns start sprouting from your body? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today I'm reviewing that old school gem, Beetlejuice. That's right, because the new Beetlejuice film is going to be out this year, and I've been doing reactions to those trailers, I just sort of thought, why not just review the original? Because it's worth it. It's a fantastic film. I own it physically and digitally, and I've watched it far too many times to count in my lifetime. So while it will obviously be a glowing review, just giving you a heads up right out the gate, let's talk a little bit about Beetlejuice. So I've said it twice. If I say it a third time, will Michael Keaton show up? I hope. It'll be like Mr. Mom, though. He'll come in with a vacuum or something, make me do some aerobics. All right. So this is directed by Tim Burton, a screenplay by Michael McDowell and Warren Scarron, and the story was by McDowell and Larry Wilson as well. Cinematography was from Thomas E. Ackerman, which was good. It's not the standout take that you get from this film. And let's just sort of talk about what the logline is here of Beetlejuice. The spirits of a deceased couple are harassed by an unbearable family that has moved into their home, and they hire a malicious spirit to drive them out. That's all it is. Like, originally, conceptually, this film is the opposite of Poltergeist. So Poltergeist is a nice family who lives in this nice house, but the house is haunted because it was built on Indian burial grounds, and sort of a child is stolen into the netherworld, and, you know, it's just like this whole sort of traditional haunting film. This is, the house is fine, the people who live there originally are fine, but they become the haunted, the ones haunting it, and it's the people that are terrible and just sort of destroying the harmony of this house, rather than the house destroying the harmony of the people. So it's a nice sort of reverse of story concept, but it works. It works brilliantly. There's a lot of things to be said about what this film was supposed to be, or what it originally sort of was slated to be, and it wasn't as funny. It wasn't even supposed to be a comedy at all originally. But once the script was handed off to the studio, they're just like, this is not going to work at all. So you're going to have to do a rewrite. Music's by Danny Elfman, which is just, it's iconic. First of all, Danny Elfman is iconic in his scores. But this one in particular, when you're just starting to see like the Geffen logo and you're getting the original sort of hints, those sort of overland shots of their home and the town that they live in, and it's just creeping in, dun dun, dun dun, dun dun dun. The music is just, it takes you right where you need to go. This sort of fantastical, terrifying place. Hey, Chris, you're looking forward to this review? Yeah, it is a long time coming, to be fair. So it was originally released March 30th, 1988. And just this last year, we got the teasers for the new film, Beetlejuice, which are coming out. It'd be nice if we got a third Beetlejuice. But the original sequel to this film was going to be Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii. Now, this is back, you know, in the late 80s and stuff. I mean, earlier than that, with like the Brady Bunch, they did a Brady Bunch movie going to Hawaii. Like, it was just a big thing that Hollywood was doing. So let's just send them to Hawaii and have nonsense ensue there. And I'm glad that didn't happen like that, because I think while I don't know the story of this, I do think we're in a creative place now that is dramatically different than back then. Back then, they would have tried to sort of make some sort of cheesy sort of remake. Now, with time and reflection, I think they decided to make a remake that pays homage to the original, but takes it to a new generation and a new direction. At least that's what I'm taking away from all of the trailers that we've seen thus far. So that being said, let's get to this film. It had a budget of $15 million, which is nothing. This was all practical effects. It was just put together beautifully. Like, and I don't even mind the sandworms or the netherworld, the way it looks. sort of cheesy and sort of cheap because it was claymation and it was practical and it was beautiful, especially in the era that it was filmed. But even today, watching this film this week before I sort of was sitting down to cogitate about this review, it holds up. It holds up wonderfully. And not in a way where you're like, oh, well, that looks realistic. No, of course it doesn't. It was never meant to look that way. But like even with the sculptures, sort of moving in to sort of capture the deets, it's great. It looks wonderful. That's what holds up about it is the original vibe you got from watching it, not in a nostalgic lens, because that's more like, well, you realize how shitty it was, but you didn't know it at the time. No, this holds up as in its intention was to be claymation and practical, and it's wonderful for it. It's better for it. All right, so it actually had a box office return of 74.7 million. So it did wonderful. And it's shocking that they didn't go through with that Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii sequel that they had planned originally, because it made so much money hand over fist for what they actually put into it. That's a $50 million return, just pure cash. That's great. All right, so it won the Academy Award for Best Makeup. It had 3 Saturn Awards for Best Horror Film, Best Makeup, and Best Supporting Actress for Sylvia Sidney, who played Juno, the caseworker, which she was in 2 scenes. How is she the best support actress? Give it to Gina Davis. Give it to Catherine O'Hare. She deserved supporting actress. Not Sylvia Sidney. Juno, give me a break. One of your favorite parts of Beetlejuice was the afterlife. You loved the... I can't even see that because there's a stupid little heart in the way. The team and the old woman caseworker. Yeah, that was Juno. So she was great in her role. But again, she was in it just 2 scenes. That was it. So I didn't really understand why she had so much attention thrown on her. All right, so like I mentioned, it stars Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. Originally, they're the homeowners, Adam and Barbara Maitland, and they own this wonderful home. They have this really annoying real estate agent / friend that's trying to sell their house out from under them, which kind of resonates to today, because I don't know about any of you guys as homeowners. I constantly get mail and phone calls of people trying to buy and sell my home. Like, that is just a huge industry right now because corporations are buying up private property to then rent or lease or redevelop. And it sucks because it means that individuals don't have an opportunity to purchase homes because corporations are coming in with infinitely more money and buying them for more than they're actually worth. So individuals don't really even have a shot. And to see that reflected in this film back in the 80s, it kind of reminded me of Goonies, to be quite honest, because that was another real estate development situation. So you're getting this idea of this small town homeowner trying to maintain their own home. They're on a staycation. Adam owns this like model or hobby shop, was the inference I got from this film. And Gina Davis's Barbara Maitland doesn't really do anything except for hang wallpaper. Like, through the whole film, all she does is hang wallpaper constantly. It's very strange. But they're doing a little staycation. They give each other little gifts for their own little hobbies. And then they have to go back into town. And on the way back to their home, they cross this bridge. There's this little animal. They have a bumper sticker on the back of their car that says, "We break for animals." Apparently, because they swerve out of the way to hit this little scruffy-looking nerf herder dog, which then puts them right over the edge of the river, and then they ultimately plummet in when the dog gets off of the lever piece of wood that was holding them up precariously in this ridiculous scenario, and they die. And so they wake up in their homes. They don't really understand what's going on. There's a fire going, so they're drying themselves out. And an interesting note about this, I think, is that Tim Burton didn't want the Maitlands to be walking around the whole time soaking wet. But every single other ghost you see looks exactly like they did when they died. So whether they had cut their throat or slit their wrists or burned themselves up in a fire or whatever it was, however they died, they reflect that way. But Tim Burton said it would just be miserable for the actors to have them soaking wet the whole time, like we first saw them coming back from the bridge in their home. So he sort of like hand waved away the reality that he was presenting for all of the dead people. And then that's when we get to see the Dietzes first. They're coming with all their moving stuff, and we get that. Here's the deal about the Dietzes. They're wonderful. I know they're horrible, but that's what makes them endearing. So the father, Jeffrey Jones's character, Charles Dietz, just wants to get away. Like his whole idea was go out into the country and just relax because city life, he's a developer apparently, but city life was just too much for him. And so this is his way of sort of getting away from it all. His wife, Lydia Dietz, played by Catherine O'Hara, who is amazing in this film. Your first impressions is she's a bitch. She's a horrible. But there are scenes in it where she's like, you never have a bad idea, Charles. Let's be honest. And he's like kind of afraid of her. He presents that face. But then they have this endearing relationship where it's almost like a farce being presented to the world. You know, people have different ways of presenting themselves, different couples. If they're in private or if they know you as a friend, you see a different side of them than maybe they present to the world. That's the vibe I get from the Dietzes. And I really appreciate it because, one, it presents a sort of stereotypical comedic, well, the husband is afraid of the wife and the wife is all forward and you know, aggressive. But the reality of it is she's not. She's a sort of a tortured artist, and she sort of tortures herself through the fact that she's not very good at her art, but she tries. But she defers to him, her husband, Charles, in almost everything except for needing to express herself, you know? And he indulges that whim because he loves her. Like genuinely, that's what it comes down to. So when you reflect back on individual scenes, you start to see that their love and connection is actually really there under the surface, but it's presented in this sort of over-the-top comedic way of being almost abusive or aggressive to each other. But that's the surface fake presentation. The truth is when they're sitting out there enjoying their coffee on their deck, just talking about the remodel and the different ideas. And yeah, Delia Dietz. She is talking to Charles and she's just like, Charles, you've never had a bad idea. Let's just do what you want to do. And you get in this true sense of love. And I really dig that. As someone who's been married for longer than time itself, it's true. You can actually have good relationships and still laugh at and with each other. Like that's probably integral to having a long relationship. But then we get to meet their daughter, played by Winona Ryder, Lydia Dietz, who is amazing. She's amazing. She comes in looking like a mod or a goth from the 70s and 80s, all drab and sort of like drawn and, you know, just sort of sad and everything. But in reality, she's also a vibrant young woman who just doesn't know where to find herself in the dynamic of this city life family who moved into this farmhouse. And because she is strange and unusual herself, she's able to actually see the ghosts of the Maitlands, Adam and Barb. And so she starts up this relationship with them, and it's all confounded because the Maitlands want to get the Dietzes out because they see them as toxic to their peace and happiness in their home and the destruction of their beloved home that they used to have and that they're stuck in for the next 150 some odd years. But they learn to love the Dietzes through Lydia. And it's this wonderful message that I pick up on throughout it that, you know, because you think someone is a certain way because they look a certain way or they initially present themselves a certain way or they act a certain way without you knowing, that doesn't necessarily mean that's who they are, the core self of who they are. And if you just give people a chance, you might learn that they're not so different and they're not so strange as you had initially thought. And you might actually get along with them. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do that or anyone should do that. I mean, hate whoever you want to hate. I don't give a fuck. You're not me. But I hedge on, you know, you tell me who you are and I'll treat you that way. So I usually find that I'm surprised. I'm surprised by people. And I think that's the message of this with the Maitlands. They're surprised by the Dietzes and who they actually end up being. and the relationships that they actually form with them, especially through Lydia. But we're also given some really wonderful ideas about what the afterlife is. I think that's fantastic and fascinating. I mean, there's like these little rules that are slipped in throughout the course of this film that, one, you always look like who you are after death, but also like if you commit suicide, for example, you end up going into administration in the afterlife, which is a weird, quirky thing. That there's this book for the recently deceased or diseased, and then deceased, depending on whether it's Adam reading it for the first time or not. But little things like that I think are just brilliant. But there's this whole rule system to the other side that is presented in a new and refreshing way. And, there's death for the dead, the room of lost souls and stuff like that. I mean, I love that there's this sort of lore based afterlife that has rules and it adheres to its own rules, and we're just sort of presented with them through the course of the film. It's not the point, but it's nice that it's there. And then we're introduced to Beetlejuice. Now, there's a big sort of argument going back and forth about the spelling of Beetlejuice, whether it's spelled the Beetlejuice way that Beetlejuice himself spells it, or whether it's Beetlejuice as in the drink juice. And of course, they went with Beetlejuice, the drink one, because it was funnier and it just sort of tested better for audiences. But it's in all of the titles. It's presented that way across the board. So I didn't mind that it's Beetlejuice, not Beetlejuice, the spelling of Beetlejuice. Primarily because the way it's presented in the film, it's only Beetlejuice himself, like the ads that he puts in newspapers and on TV and stuff, that spells, and his own gravestone and stuff, or signage. When it's coming from him, it's always spelled the Beetlejuice version. But from the outside referring to him, it's always spelled the Beetlejuice version. And I like that because it presents Beetlejuice, as being a dumbass. He doesn't even know how to spell his own name. Or he's just so strange that he feels like he should put his own stamp on his own name and spell it differently. So it separates him, as they should, from the rest of everyone in the film. Everyone in the afterlife, every living and dead human. He has his own rules that he plays by. And so it sets that up right just from the spelling of his name. And I kind of like that a lot. It tells you who Beetlejuice is. He's not your typical ghost. And, just the idea that he used to be an assistant to Juno, the caseworker, but he went rogue because he wanted to do bad things. And then he sort of got trapped because of it. And the only way to let him out is to say his name 3 times. Very sort of European fairy tale like. But it's not just saying his name initially. You have to then dig his ass up. So the Maitlands say his name 3 times because they're sort of at their wits' end. They can't seem to get this family, the Dietzes, out of their home. So they refer to Beetlejuice. They get shrunk down into Adam's model. And then they literally have to dig him up through cardboard and rubber and stuff. But when we're first presented with Beetlejuice, sweet hell, he's fucking amazing. Not only is he grotesque, but he's hilarious. He's like a car salesman, literally from hell, trying to sell his services. And it's amazing the way he tries to connect with people by looking like Adam, but he's like super attracted to Barb, and he's like trying his best to make out with her and touch her and stuff. And she's super grossed out by it. And the fact that, his head just randomly spins around and he can't help it. Like, this is a character that is unlike any other character ever seen on screen in cinema, full stop. And you would think, well, this was brilliant writing. This is the screenwriters just doing a great job of presenting this character. But you'd be wrong, because they had little to nothing to do with what Beetlejuice ended up being. So originally, they wanted Sammy Davis Jr., whom I'm a big fan of, but I could not see him in this role. And no one else wanted it except for Burton. And so the studio was looking at like Dudley Moore and even Sam Kinison, which would have been interesting because he's very close to the vibe. But Michael Keaton, who initially passed on it, but then ended up seeing Pee-wee's Big Adventure and deciding to do it, and then would later do Batman with Tim Burton again. He created the look of Beetlejuice. He said he wanted to look like he put his finger in a electric, like he was electrocuted or something. Like the hair had to be sort of wild and everything. And 90% of all of his lines, it's said to be, were ad-libbed by Keaton. So if you're thinking about who you need to give credit to for this character that, again, is unlike any other character in all of cinema, you have to give it to Michael Keaton, who is amazing in everything he does. But in this, he's next level. I mean, this is like Aladdin the Genie, Robin Williams level of performance. You know, this is like Robin Williams in anything level of performance. Michael Keaton knocks it out of the park and goes so far above and beyond anything that it actually provides a whole different tone to the film. It's brilliant. He's amazing. So the two original recordings that were included in this were from Harry Belafonte, the Day-O, and the Jump in the Line tracks, which on the surface don't seem to match up at all with anything. And in fact, they didn't even want to use them originally because it didn't seem to fit the tone of the film. But it ends up being great. And it ends up being this integral part to what this whole show is. It's this obscure conglomeration of humor and music and acting and scenario that should not ever work on paper. But on the screen, it works brilliantly. This film holds up 100%. All right, so due to the financial success, Beetlejuice animated television series was created for ABC. It ran for 4 seasons from September 9th, 1989 to December 6th, 1991. And Burton served as the show's developer and executive producer. I've actually watched this as a kid a lot, and I really enjoyed it in memory. I tried to watch a couple episodes of it recently, and it doesn't really hold up like the film. It is just one bad pun after another, packed so densely into a cartoon that there's no way kids are going to pick up on them all, because kids aren't watching things to be stimulated intellectually. They're just watching it to, watch colors floating in front of their stupid faces. But at least that's what I did when I was Saturday morning cartooning it. It's not even funny. It's not even enjoyable. I mean, the whole premise is odd because Lydia is hanging with, Lydia Dietz is hanging out with Beetlejuice the whole damn time. Which, again, in the film, he was trying to force her to marry him so that he could stay on the outside. And in the cartoon, they were off doing hijinks together. So it was a whole different type of vibe. It worked when I was a kid, I have to be fair, but it did not work as an adult revisiting it. Otto, that poem that when he resurrects the Maitlands, it's actually reading a poem called The Warning by Thomas Lovell Beddoes. I don't even know if I said any of those words right. But I thought it was interesting because it is a very, very good little poem. I thought they just sort of wrote a limerick for him to recite, but no, it's actually an established poem. The character's true name is Beetlejuice, spelled Beetlejuice in the title because they thought it marketed better, but it's actually based off of the bright red star in the constellation of Orion named Beetlejuice or Beetlejuice as well. Kind of interesting. Little tidbit there. I love the dynamic between the Maitlands and Lydia. I love the dynamic between Charles and Delia. I think they're hilarious. Otto, played by Glenn Shaddix, is a standout in this. He's great. I think I first saw him in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I really didn't like him in that because you're not supposed to. But he was brilliant in this, and I love his character because he's one of those like strange avant-garde characters that, sort of types of people that you might meet in life that I've certainly met in my life, that sort of float around between disciplines on how they make their money based on what's popular. But at their core, they think that they are this sort of artistic individual. And from the outside looking in, you're like, not so much. You can fool people like Delia, who has no artistic bones in her body, but no, like you're a fucking weirdo. So, he's like obsessed with originally ghost hunting and stuff until the bottom fell out in the 70s. And then he went to interior design and art and stuff. And it seems like Delia is the only one that actually connects with him at all. So while the Maitlands are trying to get rid of the Dietzes are realizing that there's money to be made here in real estate. And then as soon as the ghosts strike back at them with that wonderful dinner scene, they realize that, well, then we can just turn it into like an amusement park with ghosts. And so they try to get Lydia to leverage the Maitlands down here and create, for their friends, create this sort of like haunted thing. Ultimately, they bring Beetlejuice out, which terrifies the Dietzes. And then once you bring Beetlejuice out, you can't really put him back because now Lydia is forced, after Otto tries to resurrect the Maitlands to force them to be this sort of park ghost duo. She goes and makes a deal with Beetlejuice. Like, look, if you can stop them from killing the Maitlands, then I'll marry you so you can be out. And so he comes out, and we get to see some really great back and forth with Lydia and Beetlejuice. I mean, the dynamic between Winona Ryder and Michael Keaton is brilliant and hilarious, and they're just so funny back to back. But just standing back and watching, and this is where I referenced the Robin Williams with Aladdin. When Aladdin first unleashes the genie and Robin Williams does his little song and dance number, you get a vibe of just a performance. You're not being informed very much about anything. You're just sort of watching a spectacle. Well, that's what Beetlejuice is when he's unleashed by Lydia and he just goes to terrorize the guests and the Dietzes. And it's just brilliant to watch. You're just really standing back just in awe, like, what is he going to do next? Because this is hilarious. Like, I love every second of this. Like I said, it was going to be a glowing review. This is probably the best damn horror comedy in its day, like hands down. Hey, Masonic Traveler, how you doing, man? Especially my book collection. Well, that's part of it back there with a human skull. Gross. Is it Beetlejuice's? I don't know. Could be. Anyway, this is a brilliant film that if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a while, you should probably do yourself a favor. One, if you have kids, you have to show it to your kids. And two, you got to revisit it because it holds up so brilliantly. And you really get a respect for this film as an adult when you realize that a lot of this was ad-libbed. A lot of it was just because these actors got together and could play off of each other. That's the magic that this film actually turned into. And of course, the score and the filmmaker themselves did a brilliant job. I remember watching this as a kid going, am I allowed to watch this? Because this is a PG-13 film, but he drops the F-bomb. Beetlejuice says fuck. Like, and he's grabbing his dick all the time. He's making like sexual advances on Barb all the time. And then there's a whole whorehouse scene, which as a little kid was like, what the heck is this? This is awesome. Like, I like girls. Why does he have horns coming out of him? What does that mean? Like, the whole time I was just like looking back at my parents like, is this okay? Can I still watch this? Is this too adult? Because I didn't understand. Like, apparently my parents didn't give a fuck because, they let me watch whatever the hell I wanted. But like, I was genuinely wondering if this was too adult for me at times. And I'm glad that I was allowed to sort of indulge in it because it ended up being one of those films that sort of imprints on your mind. Like, oh, this type of humor, sexual humor is okay. It's not a bad thing. I don't think this would be able to be made nowadays, maintaining its rating or even some of the sequences in it. But I'm glad it was made when it was and that it did include what it did because it informed a whole generation of young men and women like me into dark horror and fantasy fiction. Not just with film, but also with literature and stuff like that. And it allowed us to then revisit some of these other wonderful films by these other actors. Geena Davis was famously in The Fly remake. Michael Keaton passed on The Fly that Jeff Goldblum ended up reprising in the remake of it. Great film. One of the first films I showed my wife when we were first dating. It grossed her out, which was hilarious. But it would have been nice to see Michael Keaton and Geena Davis in something else sort of playing off of each other because I think they're both really great actors. Geena Davis also did this really great film with It was called Long Kiss Goodnight, I think. And it was with Samuel L. Jackson. And it was this action adventure sort of film, like a spy sort of film. I loved it. It was a 90s film, so it's sort of the era. But just seeing Gina Davis, I mean, she was great in the baseball one with Tom Hanks and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I like seeing her playing off of better actors. And Michael Keaton is one of the best in the business. So I would love to see them together again. Unfortunately, I don't think she's going to be in Beetlejuice at all, which sucks. But hopefully we get a cameo. That would be dope, I think. You haven't seen it in years. You have to track it down. You definitely have to track it down, man. 100%. All right. So because of all that, because it's so great, because it's wonderful, because I love it to death, I have to give it 5 out of 5 evil eyes. Not because I want to give it 5 out of 5, but because it's earned it, because it is it. It exemplifies great filmmaking, great humor, great horror, and I can't stop laughing whenever I put it on. So do yourselves a favor and go check it out. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this review of Beetlejuice. As always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live, so get out there and be evil.